Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IMA Women's Leadership Series 2022. Bias is prevalent everywhere and it is important to address it in every way we can. Today, we kick off the first session in a series of discussions that will see finance and accounting professionals from 4 different regions discussing the many faces of biases. We will also get to hear many positive changes unfolding to break these biases. This is indeed an essential conversation that is relevant to professionals across the world over. I am Lata Murli, Manager Corporate Outreach, IMA. Glad to be initiating the Women's Leadership Series of Roundtables. May they create enough momentum and in turn enough change. One voice, one roundtable, one discussion at a time. Please join me in welcoming these inspirational women leaders who will be sharing their experience and views on biases in the workplace. Today, we have with us from India region, Tejaswini Rajwade, Chief Financial Officer, IBM India, South Asia. Tej is Vice President and CFO for the IBM India and South Asia region. Prior to this, Tej was a Vice President, Global Accounts, Receivable, Cash Management based in Ormond, USA. Tej is a Chartered Accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India with over 29 years of industry experience. Tej won gold in the category of Women of the Year at 2021 Globe Golden Bridge Business and Innovation Awards. Aparna Iyer, Vice President, Head Treasury and Investor Relations, Wipro. Aparna is Global Treasurer and Head Investor Relations for Wipro Limited, a company with a market cap of $43 billion. In a career spanning of 18 years, Aparna has played several leadership roles covering the breadth and depth of finance, ranging from internal audit, business finance, financial planning, and analytics, etc. She was recently recognized as one of the top 3 women in finance category in APAC by Weekwell Awards. Aparna passed her CA in 2002 with All India Rank 1. Sukanya Silvarajan, with over 23 plus years of work experience in the ITIS industry, Sukanya is currently designated General Manager in TCS, responsible for leading business transformation and innovation for customers in enterprise services across the world. She comes with varied experience in setting up operating units, developing sourcing strategy, and transition execution of business processes from multiple geographies across industry verticals and domains. A versatile leader and diverse skill, she has been at the helm of several complex assignments globally and has worn multiple hats in sales and solutions, transition, delivery, and transformation. In her personal life, she is a fitness enthusiast with an artistic inclination. Women empowerment and development is close to her heart. She lives in Chennai, India, with her daughter and husband. Welcome all. In the events of 2020, have sparked greater awareness of biases that prevail in society. But to set the context, what is bias and where does it come from? Tej, would you like to share your views and kickstart the conversation for today?
Sure. It's my pleasure to be here and with such illustrious ladies on the panel. So very happy to be here. When we talk of bias, bias is totally human and an unconscious response to a situation or a person based on our upbringing, experience, and exposure. In my view, bias is not always a negative. It can be just a simple preference like I like spicy food. It is a bias based on my personal taste. Nobody is without bias on earth. The problem arises is when we take decisions based on our bias, rejecting people well qualified for a role or taking a point of view which is not objective, fact-based, and in the best interest of the enterprise. Our aim is not to remove bias, but to make people aware of their biases and take informed actions based on acknowledging that these biases intrinsically exist.
Absolutely, Tej. Would you like to add on Aparna and Sukanya?
I think, Tejaswini just covered it so beautifully. So first of all, it's wonderful to be here with all of you. I'm glad that we were able to take out some time and come here on this forum. It's a very important conversation. And like Tejaswini said, that bias can not be removed because it is evolving all the time. And a lot of what it is, like she said, is just because of the culture that you've grown in. And and bias can be not just for the gender, right? It is across, it cuts across. We don't like to, we have preformed conceptions about certain way of working, right? One of the few biases that really work against the gender, is, I would say, three. One is, we perceived to be a little weaker. That's the first bias I think we, face. The second bias that we find against women, since you said, what kind of bias? The second is, we perceived to have, other primary responsibilities other than just the career, right? So in some sense, I think one of the most notable bias that people have across leadership and across cultures, not just in India, but elsewhere in the globe, is that we are perceived as this is not the first, this is not priority number one. And, it's just part of many, and therefore we may be distracted and we may not give it 100%. And I think that's the second bias that we face. The third bias is that, we are, in some sense, looked upon with a very benevolent and a protective attitude, right? And sometimes, it's just fine that, if your ambition, like if you've achieved something, people just say this is wonderful, and they don't really look at what you can do even further, but they're very happy. They sometimes try and encourage you and say, oh, this is good enough, you've achieved enough. They don't see a higher ambition for you. And I think that is a third bias, right, that we face. And I think these are some things that I would categorize are the three most dominant bias that women face at workplace. And this is something that I've also noted over the last 18 years across, cultures, and it's very universal, not restricted particularly to India. But of course, in India, we have certain other bias, like Tejaswini said, because of our experience and our culture, that also seeps in. But I think it's pretty much universal in terms of these three facets.
Absolutely, Aparna. Just you really nailed it, and in fact, it resonates very well with what Tej was saying. And so, Kanya, would you like to add a few points here?
Yeah, no, I think there is consensus to the fact that bias is largely innate, and it's not something that you're born with. It's it's largely learned, and it's learned over a period of time. It's because of historical context, beliefs, perceptions about stereotypes passed on from generation to generation. But I think it's largely due to social learning. Like you're observing friends, you're observing peers, you're observing parents. I mean, early life experiences, media, I think these are associations that probably generate this kind of bias, and it's so subtle, and it's a lifelong and partly unconscious element that really gets fueled over a period of time because of the roles that's destined upon each gender to be played. I mean, that's where it really comes from.
Yes, I completely agree with all three of you. And having heard that point, it prompts me to hear from you all that how do you think the talent pool in an organization get affected by these biases? Because Aparna very beautifully listed out a number of biases. So having said that, what impact does it have within the workplace, according to you all? Maybe Aparna, you can share your points here to start with.
Yeah, I think, like I said, we are perceived to be a little weaker. And therefore, we are not really encouraged to take up very complex choices. We are not encouraged, we are perceived to, we are asked to take the easier path. And so even if you look at even a course like, let's say, a large finance accounting course, people are usually discouraged, saying that maybe, why don't you choose something simpler? right? So it starts with that bias. And therefore, when you look at the kind of pool, even at an entry level, it is not really 50-50, at least in India, in terms of just the pass out. When you look at the number of women passing out through certain professional courses, it is still below 50, right? And even at the entry point, they're not able to find that kind of talent. It is a struggle. It is, we work very hard towards it. We overcome it, and and if you're a very reputed brand like Wipro, we're able to go ahead and make that happen. But it is very, very difficult because the society generally discourages women from taking on something that's very professional and maybe hard, perceived to be hard, right? Secondly, even in leadership, right? Again, in India, one of the real principles is that, what, you have to give it all. Can you give it your all to this leadership role, right? Do you, because, an average Indian male has that rock solid supportive wife who's going to take care of everything, starting from planning vacations to taking care of the children to taking care of the parents. And it is perhaps not a bias, and it may actually be borderline true that you yourself ask that question, and there is that self-doubt saying, can I do what this other person is doing, right? This other average Indian male, in terms of leadership. And and it goes down to that, saying that I think we've kind of taken it for granted that work-life balance is not on, and therefore so those are the things which really kind of impact whether a woman will be put up in nomination for that leadership role. And these are very subtle bias, and these are very subtle concerns that are running in people's head. Both the candidate, as a woman, even I'm having the self-doubt, and also as someone who's giving that big job to me, must be going through. And that is not what happens to an average Indian male. So it's not level playing ground at all at the first place, I feel. And so therefore there are repercussions of this bias in terms of shortage of supply. That is why most organizations start with nearly about 40-45% at the entry level, and by the time you reach mid management, you're broadly at 35%. But by the time you are at the leadership level, it's between in the teens if you're really good, and in single digits, because you really have lost out, because you're constantly not really nurturing, providing that confidence and that encouragement that you can indeed take it up, because there's a lot of doubt. And we've got to change that, I feel. We've got to and those are the changes we need to make it a level playing field. Well, men have to do more, and men need to be also asked, and truly work-life balance, and people should be encouraged, and given that confidence. And I think that's where when people see Tejaswini, when people see Sukanya, I think people will draw that inspiration. A part of this is that if today 10 women look at us and hear our story and can go back and raise their hand with confidence, I think the purpose is achieved, right? So it is about overcoming your own mindset and leadership encouraging, and then cultural bias. We've got to get more women to take up in terms of professional courses, whether it's STEM or finance, accounting, all of it.
That's nice. That's really interesting to hear. And especially I like the point you mentioned that end of the day, it all boils down to the women who are supporting all these achieving male leaders. And I would like to hear points from Paige and Sukanya also. Do you think you do have some views that resonate with what Aparna was mentioning?
Yes, I totally agree. And I'd like to flip the coin to what Aparna was saying, that I think we also need to really now make men our partners. At the workplace, the talent pool is impacted because men who take paternity leave, for example, are frowned upon. It is as if they are less. But if they have to support their wife, who is a partner and an equal partner, bringing up a child is both their responsibility. And I think women also have to help themselves by being absolutely partner with men, because it's not only the women who are suffering, the men are also suffering. They are totally missing out on bringing up their children, attending silly things like fairs and parent-teacher meetings that really may not be so much fun actually, but be partners with their spouses and being role models for their peers. Because as we behave, people observe. We are all role models at the end of the day. The second thing I think we need to do is lift each other up. It is as if we are in a race, as Sasuke, as my son says. Mama has been in this race all her life. And it is not true. And there are many women who, for the right reasons and just for personal preference, take a break to bring up their children. It behoves us to get women back to work, to make them feel they are safe, to protect them. There is an unconscious bias about commitment, as Aparna says, that unless you are here in, running at 120 kilometers an hour, you are not in it seriously. We have to change these biases. And these are not only for people, who are highly driven, etc. We have to make our workplace so much more inclusive, to allow people to come back to work, to take sabbaticals, to take paternity leave, and to break this belief that women cannot hold leadership positions in tech. LGBTQ leaders are not having the gravitas in the C-suite to really impact. It's almost unsaid. It's almost like a taboo even today. Why? It should not be. There are talent pools are therefore getting impacted, and we are therefore witnessing this gender imbalance. As Aparna said, it's just getting worse and worse as you go up, because it really takes a lot to stay the course, and it shouldn't be as hard it is. So we just have to hold each other and create a very strong sense of sisterhood, I think.
Absolutely, Paige. It's really heartening to hear these kind of points coming up from practicing leaders such as you all, and that points me. In spite of having this awareness, if you see the recent World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report that was released in 2021, they are saying that India has slipped 28 places to rank 140th among 156 countries, and becoming the third worst performer in South Asia. I don't know how far we can accept.
Did we just lose Lata? I guess.
Hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, Lata.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I think there was some technical glitch. We were dissecting so much on these facts that the internet is trying to interrupt. My apologies for that. So what I was trying to hear from you all is, do you think we have any existing policies in place focusing on closing these gender gaps? Because very beautifully you all mentioned about it. And any such practices that you have initiated or following in your respective organization, I would like to hear from all three of you.
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, the policies have always been there at a board. There are multi-fold approach that goes into it, Lata. At a governmental level, at a constitution, you've got even SEBI actually saying, you need to have at least one woman on the board. So these have always been there. But, I'm linking a point to your earlier question. What happens if there is bias, like Aparna and Tejaswini brought out? I mean, the what of it is valid and it's there. But when there is that bias, what really happens is it kind of, it skews what we bring to the table. So, it damages the development of inclusive relationships that, foster creativity, it fosters innovativeness. So that kind of goes for a toss. I think from this perspective, if corporates were to look at it, and I think all our organizations across the board have become more conscious of it these days and have adapted a culture of diversity management, which consists of, it could be personnel policies, offices, programs, and initiatives such as, trainings, or, you have these mission statements, he for she, task forces that HR personas, typically characterize to, which are largely relevant to diversity. I think these formal structures in corporates are making great strides. At least, that's what we're observing in the past few years. Some of the top firms that we all represent today have mission statements, have, proper structures that's essentially fostering these kind of action plans that, have affirmative action plans, which are most effective largely in increasing the representation of women, not only in projects and initiatives, but across the board. I was reading an article the other day, and one of a very interesting element that came up was, I think, the earlier German Chancellor Angela Merkel had actually set up like a joint forum of sorts, taking partnerships from society or from governments, from corporates, bringing them all together to ensure that there is a positive bias, essentially in ensuring there is representation of women in leadership roles as well. So I think we're getting there. Probably, I think we need to turbocharge the whole initiative to kind of, get where we need to be.
Absolutely, Sukanya. Anything else would you like to add, Aparna, on this?
Yeah, I think Tejaswini touched upon it. Safe workplace, hygiene,
Yes.
Anti-discrimination, the frameworks that Sukanya spoke about. But I think one important aspect is conviction, tone at the top. Unless you really believe it, you're not going to do it. Then this is just like something that's written on the wall and that's just must, and you don't really practice it in spirit. So really, when the rubber hits the road, when you're really talking about it, and it is a huge struggle, and I manage talent for the organization I work for in finance, and it is very difficult to make sure whenever, and this year we just tried something very simple, saying that for every attrition that we've had or every new position that gets created, we said we will have equal number of candidates of women and men interviewing for that position. And then let us choose the best, right? The other thing that someone recently told me, and it comes back to, bringing women back, but I think it can even work otherwise, is to really give a boot camp, an additional prep for the women before they come for an interview. It could be campus, it could be, when you're taking women back who are coming back to work stream. Can you do a boot camp? Can you get 50 women to really prep up, get their confidence up, and then see meet the interviewer? And then, if they match the merits. Simple things, but you will think of these things only when someone really pushes you to say that you've got to have conviction. So tone at the top for me, what your organization leaders genuinely believe, that it has to be 50-50 by a certain year. And we've got to get there. And the positive bias, the affirmative action, without really taking it away from women who make it. Yeah, so maybe do more to enable the supply. I would say, those aspects.
Absolutely, Aparna. In fact, that prompts me to just add on a point here, or rather than ask you related to domain specific, like How do you think these biases are manifesting in finance and accounting in industry in specific? Like as a women leader in the finance industry, do you face any challenges while advancing in your professional career, or taking up any special project? Like if yes, how do you respond to that?
Lata, is that question to me or to?
I'm opening this question to anyone who can take this question to the entire
I
floor.
think
I'm
we should
taking.
hear from Tej.
Sure. I think it is not a accounting finance. We all face a challenge in every aspect of work. And it is not only at work, it starts from the home. I think I've been brought up in a very traditional background. Even to date, my mother feels that why you have to work so hard. So that is bias exists. The step forward is to break it and to have that confidence to say that this is what I am, this is what defines me, this is what makes me happy. So I am going to get up every morning and come to work. The second thing is, if you talk about finance and accounting in specific, I do think there are a couple of instances in my own career that late sitting in quarter close. I mean, it can be pretty brutal for all of us, right? And for the earliest part of my life, I was specializing in tax. When a tax filing has to be done, it has to be done. There is no, even if a baby, and literally I had a baby on the way, there's nothing that can be done. You can plan around it, but you have to just put in the hours because there are severe penalties if it's not done. Having a supportive work system or network at home is extremely important to overcome these biases.
Very true.
In the same way that in every job, there are times when there is a perceived glass ceiling. There is a perception. I've worked for the longest time in the Middle East that women can't go to Saudi. And the minute someone else got the role, the person never went to Saudi. And when that time came for someone to go to Saudi, it was a woman who was non-Muslim who wore hijab and went. So these are all unconscious biases you have faced. But did the bus pass you by? Yes, it did. Now, the thing is to learn from this. One, never to be bitter, because I don't think it really yields any positive outcome. And the second thing is just to become an upstander for the next woman who comes along. That really you have to be a very strong advocate for the next generation. That if you see someone who has the potential really to go all in, to put your weight behind that LGBTQ, that woman, to help them succeed and to give them that safety net, and also to make sure that accept it. Bias exists. Break it.
Brilliant. This is one strong value key takeaway. I take it out of this session, Paige. Thank you so much for sharing that. The reason why I asked you specifically on finance and accounting, the recent study carried out by Deloitte says that in 2021, the proportion of women leaders in financial services firms was only 24%, and they are saying that it is projected to grow maximum to 28% by 2030, which is still below parity. And that was one of the reason I posted that question. So this is also one of the fact that was revealed by the gap between women in executive roles and women in senior leadership roles currently stands only at 9%. So this clearly states if we don't ramp up our efforts now, the gap will widen. And what do you think as a challenges to achieve parity, and what can be done to change things both at an individual and at an organization level? Individual level, you gave a lot of cues. I completely agree with you. And again, that has to be bought by the male partner from the personal friend, and at an organizational level. So I would like to pose this question to all of you. Maybe Sukanya, you can start with.
Sure. No, I think a great points, Tejaswini. I totally concur with you in terms of how one needs to look at it. See, the other challenges in professional life are essentially multifold. And I have realized, many a times that the hard way to address a sustainable challenge is to kind of just reflect, introspect, and adapt a style that really works for you, and that's very important. uh, one can stand up for one another, but unless you stand up for yourself, you're not going to get anywhere in it. So I think self-awareness is key, in the constant rat race that we've all described so very well. The essential need to accomplish tasks one after another, we forget the inner talent that we all carry, so that we need to develop skills of introspection to essentially identify what are our strengths and weaknesses, and we should play to our strength, and that's what each one should bring to the table. And it's gender agnostic, you should play to your strength. The second key thing is, courage. I've realized that one needs to empower oneself by standing up for their own dignity, or if you don't, who else will, isn't it? So inculcating courage, from earlier days of your work experience will take you a long way, because how to, that this essentially enhances your confidence levels phenomenally. And speak up when you get an opportunity. So those are elements that, when you stitch it all together, you will end up grabbing opportunities, like the opportunity that Tejaswini brought out. If you were given on a silver platter an opportunity to go set up something new in the UAE, wearing a hijab is the least of your worries. Essentially, that's an opportunity, that's a golden opportunity served on a silver platter that you need to grab and go after it. So there'll always be a voice in your head, and many voices outside that essentially will question you. Can you do it? Can you really do it? So I think that's something that you need to have a mission towards yourself, so that take you a long way.
That's truly inspiring, Sukanya. Now I understand how successful you are as a leader and how quickly you were able to scale up the career where you have reached today. Now, how can men, as colleagues or as managers and leaders, can help to break these biases and promote inclusivity and equality for women, especially in the workplace?
So DI is not against men.
Yes.
DI is actually an issue which men are facing as much as we are doing. If we say that the population of the world is basically at a 50-50, we are now seeing in the workplace that men are working harder and harder. And as you go up the pyramid, it is becoming even steeper or a even worse differentiation. So it is critical for men as much as it is for women. And to make the change, it is very important that women are empowered. Because when women are empowered, men are also empowered, as I said, to live a life which is just not running this single-minded race of corporate success. And this crown that we have put on their head, whether they want it or not, of being the single breadwinner, that's being measured in society by their success at the workplace. I think it is as much for men to become our allies so that they can also break this unconscious bias that men don't cry, men should always be strong, men should never have a weakness. And only then can we pass it on to the next generation where there can be some amount of parity between daughters and sons.
Absolutely, Paige. Thank you so much for those points. Like, where do you see the greatness opportunity for impact when it comes to breaking the bias and bringing inclusivity in workplace? When we say inclusivity, I'm not confining that only to male or female. We talk about the entire bandwidth here. And what do you hope for as a main takeaway from today's discussion? Aparna, would you like to share your views here to start with?
See, I think everything that we've said, right, at an individual level, we as women need to share more. We need to, like Tejaswini said, put the younger women who are coming up on our shoulders and show them the future, that it is going to be better, right? I think our seniors did that for us, and we have to do it. I think one of the key elements of how you'll be able to do it is really have networks and forums such as this, where we can find each other, form that sisterhood that Tejaswari spoke about, which is very, very critical. We need to share so that people can identify, get inspired, can say, okay, this is the way. And I do that. Every time I'm in doubt, I try and read up books that women have written, interviews that certain leaders have given. And, I feel inspired. I feel like, yeah, I feel that. I think I was in the zone. I am in the zone and I get answers. So it is very important to share, to network, and to really have this platform of shared experiences at an individual level. Apart from everything else that Sukanya said, we need to have the courage, we need to have the ambition, we should rule out self-doubt, we should have the conviction, right?
Absolutely, Abhina. So having heard that, what learnings would you like to share with young women looking to follow in your footsteps? Because I'm sure many of the participants today have found this session very, very interesting and inspiring. And having got all the three inspiring leaders with us today, we would like to hear this from you. Sukanya, would you like to share your views here?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said earlier, I mean, know your strengths, play to your strengths. One thing that we all do is we overanalyze many a time. I have done it. So much so, even after I hit the sack, I mean, maybe I should have done this a little differently. You end up thinking, stop doing it. It took me years to kind of stop doing that. So don't overanalyze. It's not even worth a penny. So that's something that I have learned. Speak up, speak your mind, be vocal about what you really want. And many a time we're told, like, if we are good, the opportunity will come your way. It does, but you need to be vocal about it, saying, hey, I'm open to opportunities, so grab those opportunities. Take risks. It's okay to do something for the first time that you've never done before. Travel to a new place you've never done before. It's all about adapting and learning and honing, and you develop skills in that process, right? And then you learn some more and then some more. So be ambitious, and we've got a dozen of things. We've got all the balls up in the air, so we have to keep juggling it one after another. So I think we need to learn to prioritize. That's key. You can't get everything on number one priority on all days, so you'll have to prioritize it by the day. And like Aparna rightly said, stand up for sisterhood. Stand up for other women in your circle. It starts from your circle, at personal levels, at professional levels, your colleagues, your peers, your team. So stand up for them, be their sponsor. I think, if you've had a sponsor, great. If you've not had a sponsor, you've learned that you need a sponsor. So be that sponsor for somebody. And I think that's essentially where I would give my thoughts to.
That's absolutely a very strong message, Sukanya. Tej, would you like to share your views?
My view on this is that be confident. And I took a lot of time to get there. I think statistically, women are smarter than men. I mean, it's just a proven fact. Aparna is a rank holder. I was
Yes.
a bright girl. But I don't think I really had that confidence. It was always this upbringing and this feeling that be nice was more important than go for that job or go for that, whatever I wanted to. And I think it's to Sukanya's point that really go for it and be confident. What's the worst that can happen? We will fail, right? But so many men fail. It's again statistically proven that men think they're ready for a job years before a woman says, I'm ready. We have fixed it and overthought it and slept, and every tick mark in that JD job description before we say, I think I'm ready. So for me, the biggest thing is confidence. And I don't mean that in your face, rowdy confidence. I mean a quiet, intrinsic belief that I've got this. And I've got this both ways. If I fail and get pie on my face, I'll get up and walk still. And if I get it well, I always knew I was going to get it. So it is very important, I think, that women really need to think they are overconfident before they come across as confident.
That's a pretty strong message, Tej. Hearing it from you, it's truly inspiring. And we do have a question from one of our participants. The question goes, as the pandemic has stretched on, women are well able to maintain their careers. However, I feel while demand for women's workforce continues to escalate, but recognition doesn't. What do you have to say on this? I'm opening the floor to anyone to jumpstart the conversation on this point.
Sure. I mean, I can share my views, Lata. I mean, essentially, it's a great question. Recognition while in the workplace pre-pandemic itself was a big challenge, and on what levels do you recognize? How are we covering everybody? Because you recognize five you're not recognizing. Are we upsetting the cart there? So that's one dimension there. But what it has come to now is all about, I think, disruption, Lata. I mean, that's what I would like to call it. Breaking the bias today is all about disruption. You take away, you kind of reconfigure these power relations. When somebody is doing well, and it's gender agnostic. Now with the pandemic state, people working from home, it becomes all the more clear. You're objectively evaluating individuals and then saying, hey, these individuals have scored well, these have not. And then it becomes all the more clear today, and I see it as an advantage because, when you really want to disrupt this bias and ensure that people who really need to start moving up are given the additional help, are fostered and mentored accordingly to take up larger assignments, hone their skills, and go from there. So that's essentially the view that I have on this.
Absolutely. That's really, really fantastic. I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation today. And I just can't thank each and every one of you enough for taking out your time, for joining us during the session today. Thank you, Sukanya, Tej, and Aparna. In fact, I would definitely like to say the boot camp mentioned by Aparna before the actual interview is very interesting and a very innovative idea. Thank you so much, Aparna. And I like the way Tej insisted on these confidence and resonating that Sukanya also re-insisted on self-awareness being the key of, breaking all these biases and being on top of it. Thank you so very much for such a wonderful session. Before we close the session, I would like to mention some of the resources that are available with IMA and wanted to emphasize how IMA is keen about this D and I and our commitment towards this particular D and I. So we recognize this as a business imperative. So to mention that, it's not only the educational resources, but also some of the best practices and guidelines are also given. And we do have something called diversity, equity, and inclusion kit available in our website. So this is a message to all the participants in case if you are interested to know more about it, to understand the guidance or to know about this D and I kit, please do visit IMA website to know and download the document to have a good read. And so we also embrace the culture of open-mindedness and encourage multiple perspectives to create and deliver value by collaborative working and innovative solutions. So I take this opportunity to mention about the resources that are available with IMA on D and I. Thank you so very much. And we have been able to take up many of your questions. And in case if you still have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We will be happy to share those questions with the speakers, and we will request them to respond to those questions at their earliest. And have a fantastic afternoon and stay tuned for many such series like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, all the speakers, for such a wonderful session. Thank you so much.